Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and welcome to the Bennett Civic Center Library, the Livonia Chamber of Commerce's Candidate Forum, featuring the candidates running for mayor in next month's primary election. My name is Dan West, the President of the Livonia Chamber of Commerce, and I'll be the moderator for this program. Thank you for joining us this evening. This forum is designed to be an informational program to give Livonia's business community and residents a chance to learn more about these candidates. On Tuesday, August 6th, Livonia voters will decide which two mayoral candidates will advance to the ballot for the general election to be held on Tuesday, November 5th. There are other Livonia issues on the August 6th ballot. There are 12 candidates running for Livonia City Council, and voters will decide which 8 of those will advance to the general election ballot. Also, Livonia Public Schools have 2 millage proposals on the August 6th ballot. The Livonia Chamber of Commerce has prepared concise biographies for each of the mayoral and city council candidates and prepared details about the LPS millage issues in a print program available as you walked in today. Feel free to grab one on your way out today, but it's also available on our chamber's website, livonia.org. The Livonia Chamber of Commerce is a nonpartisan, nonprofit trade organization that represents more than 1,000 businesses and organizations. The chamber does not endorse individual candidates. However, the chamber occasionally takes positions on ballot issues that impact the Livonia business community. Accordingly, the Livonia Chamber of Commerce endorses both millage proposals sought by Livonia Public Schools on the August ballot. And then also, we are broadcasting this program on Twitter Live through the Livonia Chamber handle. And then additionally, we are recording the forum as well, which will be made available on YouTube in the coming days. So there'll be other opportunities for your friends and neighbors to hear what was said tonight through those forums. So in tonight's forum, we'll spend about an hour hearing from the mayoral candidates this evening. Members of the Chamber's Government Affairs Committee established the format and the initial questions for this forum. The audience is invited to ask questions of the candidates by submitting 3x5 cards. We've got Eric and Jason in back who can run a card too if you're interested. If you have a question, raise your hand and they will come and retrieve those cards for you. We will screen them to make sure they're not redundant, inaccurate, or personal, and we'll ask as many questions as we can in our time allotted. All 3 mayoral candidates were invited to participate in this evening's forum in the first week of June. We have 2 candidates who confirmed their participation and are with us tonight. We have veteran former Livonia City Councilwoman Maureen Miller-Brosnan, and we have retired Deputy Fire Chief Bruce Tensley. City Council Council President Laura Toy could not join us this evening. Each are running for a 4-year term as Mayor of Livonia, a full-time position as the Chief Executive Officer for the city. Each mayoral candidate will be invited to make a 90-second opening statement and a 90-second closing statement. Each candidate will have 1 minute each to answer a question. However, each candidate will have a chance to use up to 2 30-second rebuttals to their opponent's response if their opponent had a chance to speak last to a question, or if they want more time to answer a question. Laura Tamuch and Dawn Smith are in the front row, along with Sherry Davidek, and they will serve as our timekeepers and inform the candidates of the time that's remaining. So with that, we'll begin our forum. First, the 90-second opening statement for Mrs. Brosnan.
Thanks, Dan. I'm Maureen Miller-Brosnan, and I'm running for mayor because I believe that Livonia is an exceptional city with a bright future. I see our city's potential, and I know that together we can make this city a city our children want to come home to. But there's work to be done. Tonight's forum is a job interview, so let's start by giving you some background. I've lived in Livonia for 54 years. My parents still live in the house that I grew up in. My husband and I met at St. Michael's. We have 3 children. I ran my first company when I was 27 years old, and I have 30 years of experience managing nonprofits. I served for 17 years on the City Council, and I'm currently the interim CEO of Catholic Charities of Southeast Michigan and chairman of the board of St. Mary Mercy Hospital. A lot has changed in Livonia since I was a little girl. Today we have paramedics because I was a champion for having a fully trained fire department. As mayor, I will tackle head-on the shortage of police and firefighters, making it a priority that I address in my first month of taking office. Today, Michigan has more investment in entrepreneurs than ever before because of the work I did with the Michigan Venture Capital Association. As mayor, I'll work with our business leaders to build a strong workforce development program to create more jobs here in Livonia. And no one is more prepared to fight for our fair share of road dollars. I served for 4 years on the State Transportation Commission, and as mayor, I'm going to use that experience to make sure we have better roads and bridges in Livonia. I look forward to sharing many of my ideas with you tonight.
All right. Mr. Tenniswood, your 90-second opening comment.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. My name is Bruce Tenniswood. Like Dan said, I'm a retired deputy fire chief from the City of Wesleyan Fire Department. We've got 25 years of working in municipal government, none of which as an elected official. And I like to think of that as being a very big credential. I come to this city with an unbiased view of government. I am only running because I want to serve. I want to thank the Livonia Chamber of Commerce for hosting this forum, and thank you all for watching. I believe that an engaged electorate is the only way to affect government in a positive way. I especially want to thank the Chamber for their endorsement of the school villages. I think that is a very wise decision coming from the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber represents over 1,000 members of Livonia's business community and performs a valuable service to the city. Thank you for that service. A proper working relationship with the business community is a critical role of city government. The Chamber has an exemplary record of facilitating those relationships. However, I believe that elected officials must once again commit to keeping Livonia families first. My campaign was inspired in part by some of our elected officials' failure to look out for the welfare of residents put in harm's way by a corporate polluter. As your mayor, I will be honored to work with the Chamber members, but I will always have our residents' interest my first priority. Thank you, and I look forward to a spirited conversation.
All right, we'll go into the first question, starting with Mr. Tenniswood. On your first day as mayor, what will be your first issue you intend to address?
The very first issue that I intend to address is to set ground rules for all of the city employees. We have to remember that as mayor, I will be responsible for the day-to-day operations of the entire city workforce. When I was running a company called Rapid Response EMS, it was a team of about 150 people, most of them young EMTs and paramedics. I made it crystal clear that I had 2 rules for the company that were absolutely unbreakable. Rule number 1 was to be nice. And rule number 2 was to don't be stupid. And I mandated that. And I found that over 25 years of city service, that almost every personnel issue that I ever dealt with was a violation of one of those 2 things. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that my employees know where I'm coming from. And then I will tackle some other issues that we'll be talking about tonight.
Mrs. Brosnan?
Thanks, Dan. One of the advantages that I'll have coming to the office is that I've had an opportunity to serve for 17 years with so many of the leaders in our community. Some of our administrative department heads they're all very familiar to me. So that learning curve is not going to be as steep, and I'm looking forward to having that as an advantage. So that is going to afford me the opportunity to really dig right in. And one of the main things, as I said in my opening remarks, that I know that we're going to have to really pay attention to is what's going on with our police and fire department. We are currently suffering a shortage of police and firefighters. We're having a really hard time retaining them. We're having a hard time attracting them. And Livonia used to be a city that had no problem doing any of that. So a big part of what I'll be doing when I first take office is tackling that problem head on.
All right, the next question will first go to Mrs. Brosnan. We've seen more young families and professionals move into Livonia in recent years, and their consistent movement to the city in recent years have helped boost real estate values for all Livonians. How do you plan to engage young families and young professionals who recently moved here as mayor?
So the work to engage young families actually began quite a while ago when I served on the city council and was really active in making sure that we had the Kirksey Recreation Center here in the city. I was part of the team that selected the architectural firm, put the shovel in the ground as president of the city council at the time, and it's been a big draw. General overall health in our community, the fact that Livonia is going to be one of the healthiest cities in the United States, is a big reason why people are going to be coming here to live. And I do think it's part of how we attract young people. We have the largest number of parks. We have an amazing connectivity plan that I helped to put in place to connect our bike paths to our roads and to create a system where we can use non-motorized vehicles to move throughout our community. All of these are super attractive, but nothing is going to be more attractive than having strong schools. So that school-city partnership is going to be a major portion of what I focus on as mayor.
Mr. Kenniswood?
So this question has come up several times about young families, and I think that the answer for attracting young families is the same answer as any other families. I think that the role of government is to provide the absolute best city services that can possibly be provided within the budget. And I think that is very important. With that being said, I think the city's concentration on city services attracts all people, whether they're young people, whether they're seniors wanting to move back into the city. Regardless of who they are, I believe that we have to hold values of properties and we have to hold values of life in our city and make it attractive to the general population. And then whoever wants to move into our city, we want them to feel welcome. I believe that we've got a fantastic city as it is. And of course, we will continue to improve it, but I think that what the city's job is to maintain what we've got.
All right, the next question will first go to Mr. Kenniswood. Does Livonia City Hall and the Livonia Civic Center campus need to be redeveloped? And if so, why and how do you plan to do that?
This came up in the last forum. I absolutely believe that City Hall is a dinosaur. We were discussing energy efficiency while we were sitting in City Hall, and I cannot think of a more inefficient building in the city than City Hall. It was built at a time when energy efficiency was not even a factor. I don't believe that the city is in a position to replace City Hall right now. I think it is something that we have to start the conversation. But I would like to see eventually all of the city buildings taken to LEED certification. And then I also think that the campus itself should be redesigned into something that is going to be somewhat closer to a downtown, if you will. I'm not a big fan of the downtown idea because I think that our city is built out and I think we're about 50 years too late for that. But I do think that we can improve what we've got significantly.
Mrs. Brosnan?
Thanks, Dan. You know, the City Hall campus gives us perhaps the biggest opportunity that we're going to have in the course of the next 10 years to dream big for our community. We began that dream about 2 years ago with a process called Livonia Vision 21. This was something I fought for 8 years to make sure that we had a long-range plan for development in our city. And one of the target areas in our community was the Civic Center campus. So the citizens of Livonia got a chance to sit down and wipe the slate clean and say, if you could make this anything you wanted it to be, what would it be? There's a plan for the City Hall campus that talks about a new City Hall, that talks about how we make it an area in our community that is more integrated and has more activities and really becomes a social hub for our community. That plan sits on a shelf, and my job as mayor is to get it off the shelf and make sure that it gets implemented.
All right, the next question will go first to Mrs. Brosnan. And you alluded to this earlier. The Livonia Police Department is understaffed, and some attribute the shortage to the loss of Livonia officers to other municipalities with more competitive compensation and benefits. As mayor, how do you plan to address this issue?
So a big part of how we have to address that issue is to really take, again, one of those clean slate looks at the compensation package that we have. The city did what it needed to do back in 2008 when we got out of a defined benefit plan and moved to a defined contribution plan. We needed to do it in order to balance our budget. A lot of communities were doing it at the time. We have, though, found that competing cities have found a way to either increase salaries or to put healthcare benefits in place that are adding to a package, or to put some form of a hybrid defined benefit, defined contribution plan in place. Both our police and fire unions have approached the administration with some form of a defined benefit plan, and it's going to be my job to take a look at all of that and weigh whether or not we're going to be able to afford to do it, and if we can, to make sure that it happens.
Mr. Kenniswood?
So you asked what I'd be doing on day one. This is what I'll be doing in the afternoon of that day. I come from that world. I spent my years in the fire service, and I grew up in an environment with a defined benefit plan. I understand the benefits of it. I stayed in very close touch with, especially the fire service, but the police service as well. I understand competition and how it works. Our city is not competing right now with the other cities. People have to understand that in the world of police and fire, we're limited already as to the applicants, because quite frankly, society has made it so that the police department especially, but the fire department is really not all that great of a place to be. And on top of that, now we've taken away the one serious lure towards the fire service or the police service. And we've got to re-examine that, because right now what we're doing is just not working.
All right, the next question will first go to Mr. Tenniswood. There's a lot of development, new development targeted for the northwestern corner of the city with at least 2 major healthcare facilities, 1, maybe 2 apartment complexes, and several new dining and retail operations. All these approved and proposed projects are slated for areas between 6 Mile and 8 Mile, Haggerty and Newburgh Roads, which is already a busy area. As mayor, how do you plan to facilitate and balance the excitement of the new development, but also realizing that there will be a significant boost in traffic to that area as well? And I guess the question is, how do you plan to facilitate the significant increase in traffic with all this development would bring?
Well, one of the big advantages that we have by developing that area is the easy access to the expressway. As much as I would like to think that all that activity will be Livonia residents, quite frankly, it's not going to be. So I think a lot of the traffic situation is going to be alleviated by the fact that the expressway is right there, very easy access. 8 Mile is a bit questionable, but again, those are things that we're going to have to work with the state on improving access to the expressway. One of the things that excites me about this whole concept that's going on there is for every large facility, there's so many spin-offs. And we have a significant problem in the city with things like strip malls that are vacant. I'm currently working on a project right now in Plymouth with a job that I do that is a direct result of the large announcement that was made by the medical facility coming in at Hanover Road in Haggerty. And these are all spin-offs that I'm working on developing. I know that that same thing is going to happen there.
Mrs. Brosnan?
Thanks. Dan, I know traffic is a huge concern for Livonia residents. We are very used to things being the way they are. And at the same time, we find ourselves being tugged in this other direction where we want to grow and we want to be the next best shiny thing. So I think the role of a mayor, whenever we're looking at that kind of growth, is to recognize the tension exists, first of all, to try to get as best a handle as you can on the impact that those changes are going to have in your neighborhoods. Traffic studies are one of the best ways that we have in order to do that. So for major projects like this, it becomes imperative that developers alongside the city work to develop those traffic studies. And I think once we get those models put in place, we're going to be better able to negotiate with the state and with the county so that we design traffic patterns that can then accommodate the increased traffic that we have and alleviate some of that tension.
All right, the next question will first go to Mrs. Brosnan. Please give us an example of how you have led effective change in an organization or among people who are very much set in their ways. I'll read it again. Please give us an example of how you have led effective change in an organization or among people who were set in their ways.
So when I first started on the city council, one of the big challenges we had was to try to find a way to provide additional service for our residents in terms of an advanced life support service. And the administration at the time thought that really the best way to go about that was going to be to contract for that service. So my thought was that really what we wanted was to create a city of the future, and that city of the future meant that all of our firefighters ought to be trained as paramedics. It was a huge cost, but we also recognized that there was, I did anyway, that there was a huge benefit in doing that. So in order to change hearts and minds, we tried it one way. We tried contracting at the beginning, and we tried to see if that would reach enough residents. Would it save enough lives? Would it provide us the service we needed at the most cost-efficient point? And it was only after trying it that we finally learned that what we really needed to do was make sure we had a fully trained force. So I think it's sometimes in working in those types of settings where you try something first and then figure it out.
Mr. Tenniswood?
I have to kind of laugh at the question because I spent 25 years in a fire station. Think that didn't happen on a daily basis, you're crazy. think one of the big changes that I made in the fire department when I reached the rank of deputy chief, and it kind of went against the grain of some of the people, and it certainly went against the grain of some of the administrators, but we were in a work environment that was completely wrapped up around rules and regulations. We had a binder full of directives. And one of my very first things that I did as deputy fire chief was to eliminate the binder and start over with standard operating guidelines. And I insisted that it be that way. It didn't take very long before the rest of the department caught the vision, including the chief. And to this day, they still operate on standard operating guidelines, which is a concept of allowing people to use a little bit of common sense. And if they deviate from the guideline, be able to explain it.
All right, very good. The next question will first go to Mr. Tenniswood. The Livonia Chamber has long talked about the shortage of skilled and technical talent in the city and region and its implications on economic development. There are many companies turning away projects and opportunities to grow because they cannot find enough skilled workers. As mayor, what do you plan to do to boost the talent pipeline for Livonia's employers?
Well, there's several things that have to be done. One, we have to foster a good relationship with the school district. We have to keep these talented young people in our city. And how do we do that? We provide the city services and we provide the kind of city that they want to stay in. So that's the first thing. The other thing is we have a history in this city of fostering excellent relationships with institutes of higher learning. And I think that we need to continue that. We need to make sure that the city of Livonia is a city that a university finds it easy to do business with. And I think those are things that we can do to foster having those highly skilled people come to or stay in our city. I think, again, we have to focus on what the city's responsibility really is, though, and that is providing city services.
Mrs. Brosnan.
Thanks, Dan. This is actually a question that you and I have talked about on various occasions because it's important that an effort to create jobs and to lead job development also involve the Chamber of Commerce. So Dan is one of those brains that I picked in order to understand better what we were doing and some of the things that we weren't doing. And it would appear that everybody is doing a lot in this area. The problem is that we are all operating in silos. Whether it's the schools, whether it's the chamber, whether it's some of our 10 largest businesses in the city of Livonia. So the role, I think, that a mayor is going to be able to play, especially a mayor that's focused on job development, is going to be to help to facilitate bringing all of these organizations and all of these groups together so that we can begin to speak as one very strong voice, which is one of the things that we don't do particularly well in Livonia, is to tell our story. So we're going to have to begin to do that as soon as we get an opportunity to all come together around jobs and jobs development.
All right, the next question will first go to Mrs. Brosnan. In recent years, Livonia has seen new large employers come to town with Amazon, Masco, and Republic National Distributing Company. As mayor, what will you do to attract the next large company and employer to Livonia?
You know, I think one of the things about Livonia that is so attractive and appealing is that, number one, we do have fantastic city services. Number two, we do have leadership and a leadership team that makes it easy to do business in Livonia. So making sure that we continue to have those elements in place and that there's no disruption to it, but also making sure that people are more aware that we have these types of operations that are available. I think that's going to work to help and attract more new businesses to come. That, along with a well-trained workforce, is going to be critical. So making sure that we get that workforce development program really up and running is going to be critical as well.
Mr. Chancellor?
I think that the first thing that we need to do, or I will do as mayor, is to conduct a study of the effect of having these large businesses. The vast majority of jobs in the state of Michigan, and quite frankly the country, is provided by small business. And I would like to see, we brought in some wonderful large companies, that is for sure. There's a lot of effort involved in getting these companies here. There's a lot of effort in making the project take place. And now we have some data that we can look at. And as mayor, I would like to look at the effect of these companies and really see where our economic development people need to be focusing. Is it the right thing to continue to bring in large companies, or do we need to refocus on smaller companies?
All right, we're about the halfway point of our forum this evening, and I thought we'd do a quick little lightning round, some lighthearted questions to learn a little bit more about our candidates. So the first intense question I'm going to ask is, first with Mrs. Brosnan, what's your favorite color?
I do not have a favorite color. Isn't it crazy?
You don't sure you do.
I really don't.
Yes,
I love them all.
green all.
But I do wear green a lot. So let's
Mr. Tenniswood, your favorite color?
I'm a fireman.
Oh, right.
What can I say?
All right,
It's
next,
not hard.
go.
next tough question. Mr. Tenniswood, the first concert you went to?
First concert was Loverboy and the Hooters.
What venue?
That was at the Joe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a little embarrassed. Johnny Mathis with my parents at Pine Knob.
It counts, right? All right, Mrs. Brosnan, the first car you drove?
Oh, Dad, what did I drive first? A Corsica, I think, was my first car I owned.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Tenniswood?
First car I owned showed the genius of my dad. I wanted to get a 1976 Grand Prix, and I didn't have enough money for it, but he told me he would help me finance a 1981 Mercury Lynx with a 4-cylinder in it. It was like ultimate nerd car, but he made it so I had to buy it. Now I have sons. I understand why he wanted me in a 4-cylinder.
And the last of the lightning round here, I think Mrs. Brosnan, no, Mr. Tenniswood with this one, your first job.
My first job was at Midwest Paint and Color on Michigan Avenue. I begged them for a job until they finally relented. And the reason I got a job there is because I could walk from home. Made paint.
I worked at Glamour Cleaners in Livonia, in both of their locations, one on 5 Mile and Levan, and then the other at 5 in Merriman. I was a glamour girl.
All right, well, thank you for participating in that audience. I hope you got to see a little more lighthearted nature of our candidates here. So, the next of the formal questions here, we'll first go to Mr. Tenniswood. Regional experts say foreign migration will be the largest source of population gains in the coming decades for Southeast Michigan, including Livonia. How do you plan to handle this dynamic as mayor?
I plan to handle that dynamic exactly as I plan to handle the millennials coming into our city and everybody else. I'm going to welcome them with open arms, and we are going to provide them with the absolute best in city services that I can possibly provide. I believe that is the standard job of this city, and that's what I will adhere to 100% of my time.
Mrs. Brosnan?
Very similarly, we have a lot of people that are beginning to pay attention to the high quality of life that we have in Livonia and want to be part of our community. I think it's really important that we approach that with open arms as a welcoming community. And that's for everybody that wants to locate here. And I think we've done a lot of that. I think as mayor, there's one area in particular that I'll have a chance to really impact, and that is when we select our representatives to serve on various boards and commissions that the mayor gets a chance to appoint. I think it's important that those boards and commissions reflect the people that the boards and commissions are representing. And I'm going to get an opportunity to do that as there are a considerable number of vacancies that exist right now.
All right, we're going to start getting into the audience questions here. This first one will go to Mrs. Brosnan. In November 2018, 55% of Livonia voters voted in favor of Prop 1, the cannabis legalization law. Livonia's current government quickly opted us out of cannabis business without any research or discussion. How will you handle this issue going forward as mayor?
So there are a lot of unanswered questions relative to the new marijuana law. Come December 6th of 2019, the state of Michigan has its deadline that's looming over the regulations that it needs to put into place. So the city council was pretty firm in its ban, but I do think that once those regulations are finalized, it would really behoove us as a community to study the impact that those regulations are going to have on us. To bring together a task force of people, people from our public safety division, people from our youth task force, people that are coming to us from the hospital that may help to inform what this new world's going to look like, given the fact that we now have legalized marijuana in Michigan.
Mr. Tensley?
So coming from someone who has never so much as smoked a joint in my life, I don't have a dog in the hunt with marijuana. But I do believe that the city needs to reevaluate the decision that was made. And my reason for that is pretty simple. There is a taxation that goes along with marijuana. And the view of the council was that that tax comes at a price. The money comes, nothing's free. The money comes at a price. And that is because of either perceived or real problems that go along with the marijuana industry. The problem that I have with the decision that was made was that we have elected to forego the excise tax. In other words, we are foregoing the benefit of it, but we're really not eliminating our exposure to the problem, because anyone that wants marijuana can just go to a neighboring community and bring it into our community. And we have to remember that the majority voted for it.
All right, the next question will first go to Mr. Tenniswood. Does Livonia need to do more to enhance its public transportation system?
I believe that Livonia needs to do more for its transit system. I believe that Livonia residents have made it pretty clear that they want transportation for those in need in the city of Livonia. I do not believe that it is a good idea to get back into the smart system, and I believe that's what the question really is. I believe that we tried that. I don't believe that it's necessary. I believe that it's Livonia tax dollars that are being spent without a direct benefit to Livonia residents, and I don't think that's a good idea.
Mrs. Brown?
Thanks, Dan. I think the question is more relative to transit in general. And I do think we need to spend some time studying how people get around our community, but more importantly, how people get to work in our community. We have a number of large businesses, Amazon, we have the new distribution center, you mentioned the hospitals, outpatient facility that's going to be developed, and there are a number of other hospital systems that are developing in our community that are growing employers, and they're building their number of employees, and not everybody comes with a car. And I think that as we change as a community, as we invite more large businesses into our community, we're going to have to step back and ask ourselves the question, are we servicing them the very best way that we can? Does that mean opting back into smart? I don't know. I think that's one option, but I think there are a whole host of other opportunities that need to be considered as well.
Dan, I'd like to use 30 seconds. Maureen has just hit on one of the things that make me wonder about this whole mass transit system. We have, and I also expressed some concerns about large businesses. This is why we need to evaluate these large companies that are coming in, because I do not believe that it's the responsibility of the city of Livonia to provide transportation for people coming into these businesses. If Amazon pays as much as they claim they pay, those people can get a car. That's something that I think we need to seriously reevaluate before we encourage large business or additional transit.
Very good. Okay, the next question will first go to Mrs. Brosnan. How will you work with Wayne County to fix the roads that they're responsible for?
Oh, how I love this question. You know, long before anybody uttered the words, fix the damn roads, I've dedicated a lot of time to working in the city of Livonia to make sure that that happened. I served for just about every year that I wasn't chairperson of the council or president of the council as the chairperson of the Streets and Roads Committee in Livonia. I was part of the team that put together the Road Village program, where we took a look at putting in place a road assessment, and we valued our roads as if they were an asset. We were one of the first cities in the state to do that. I served for 4 years on the Michigan State Transportation Commission, so I don't know that there's anybody better positioned in the field of candidates to fight for better roads and bridges. What it means is getting involved early. Plans are set on a 5 to 10 year basis for road improvements, and we need to be in the mix really early as a strong voice advocating on our city's behalf.
Mr. Tenniswood?
I don't know if anyone has seen the map showing what Wayne County is doing in Livonia this year, but it's a travesty. We are a large city with a very large tax base and a very large electorate. And the amount that Wayne County has dedicated to Livonia this year is laughable if it wasn't so serious. I believe that as mayor, I'm going to be in a position, I guess maybe you hear sometime about leading from behind, and that's kind of how it is from the county. I believe that the people making the decisions at the level of the county need to be held accountable. And I have several ideas on how I'm going to handle that. Well, one of those ideas is I'm going to make sure that there's transparency so that the city of Livonia, the voters, the residents, know exactly what communications are going to Wayne County, and they're going to be able to read the communications come back. And I will let the voters of Livonia decide if they want to re-elect these people in Wayne County based on their responses to what we asked for.
All right, the next question will go to Mr. Tenniswood first. We have had historically a strong, stable city. In what area do you think we need to improve the most?
I believe that we still are a very stable city, but I believe that the area that is crying for help is public safety. And I think that that's pretty much indisputable. We are losing police officers and firefighters faster than we can replace them. I was particularly disturbed when I found out that we lost a 12-year veteran of the police department that went to another community for benefits. That is not how you have a stable community. And we can talk about the premier public safety departments that we have all we want. The reality is they're not staying here, and they're not coming to replace the ones that are retiring. So I believe that is the #1 priority that we have to do as far as stabilizing our city. We will not last. There was an incident just this last week where the fire department could not get a police officer at the fire station for a suspicious situation. That's ridiculous. And we have to fix that, and we've got to fix it now.
Ms. Bratton?
Dan, can you repeat the question? Sorry.
We have a historically strong, stable city. In what area do we need to improve the most?
Okay. As I stated earlier, we are going to have to pay a lot of attention to what's going on with the police and the fire department. We're obviously going to have to pay a lot of attention to what's going on with the roads. It's going to demand a lot of my time. Workforce development is the third area that I'm going to be focusing on. But I don't want to let it go that one of the things that Livonia has not done particularly well is to tell our story. We really haven't done a great job of marketing our community. I think we're one of the best kept secrets in Michigan, quite honestly. We have some of the friendliest neighborhoods of any city you're ever going to be in. We have some amazing conveniences in Livonia that exist here. And I often hear from people outside the city of Livonia saying, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that you had one of the lowest divorce rates in the country. I didn't know that you had the highest number of churches per capita, one of the cities with the highest number of churches in the country. I didn't know these things about Livonia. And it's time we begin to talk about that.
The next question will first go to Mrs. Brockman. This is to follow up on the discussion about police. The use of artificial intelligence facial recognition software by police has been a hot topic regarding public privacy. What is your view of its use here in Livonia?
Dan, I'll admit that I'm not as well versed on how it's being used in Livonia. So before registering an opinion on anything relative to how we administer public safety in the community, the first person I'm going to go to is the chief. I think that's just going to be my natural course of action. We had an extremely safe community, one of the top 10 safest communities in Livonia. It doesn't happen by chance. It happens with a great deal of deliberate thought and intent. So before making a decision or sounding off on something like that, I want to get as much information I could from the people that are here keeping us safe every day.
Mr. Tenniswood.
I believe that this is something that we are going to have very strict legal opinions on. before we use it in our police department. But at the same time, I want to make sure that we interject some common sense into it. I want to tell you something that happened when I was in the fire department. We ended up getting thermal imaging cameras when they were first brand new to the market. And one of the very first events that happened after we got our camera was a barricaded gunman who was firing shots. And we were on the scene, and the officers were struggling to determine where this person was in the house. And I offered the thermal imaging to the police department and said, here, look for him, and you'll be able to see right through the walls and see where he's at. And they just froze on it because they had such strict guidelines of aiming a thermal imager at a house because it's a violation of the person's rights. Well, I'm sorry, when someone's in the house and they're firing shots, in my book, they don't have any rights.
All right, the next question will go to Mr. Tenniswood. It's another audience question. We're trying to paraphrase this, but basically, they're talking about the churches, service organizations, civic groups, all the service clubs are looking for younger members, to replace those that have been so involved in getting older in our community. What could you do to help encourage and support these groups, especially as they look to impact positively what goes on here in Livonia? So basically, what will you do as mayor to engage more young people to get involved in our service groups and in our community?
I think that engagement with those groups comes as a natural fallout from the engagement in general. And I, even as a parent, was always interested in my children being engaged in things like government. And they might cringe when I remind them of that. But I think that it's important that we as parents engage our children, but even as community leaders, we need to make sure that the opportunities are out there for young people to even understand how city government works. Because I think as they get involved in those things, they're more inclined to be involved in community organizations and groups like that.
Mrs. Brosnan?
One of the things that fell by the wayside back in the mid-90s under Mayor Bennett was a program that on a regular monthly basis, he used to bring all of our civic groups together, our churches together, around a calendar. That was the focus. We didn't have the internet then, we didn't have common calendars and Google Docs and all of that good stuff. So people had to physically gather in a room. The benefit of physically gathering in the room was this cross-sharing of information that took place. And during that time, we really saw a lot of our smaller nonprofit organizations begin to grow and blossom, and as a result, attract a large number of volunteers. We have a very strong volunteer community in Livonia, so the opportunity to go back to the Bennett days and pull together our civic organizations in that type of fashion, I think is a good idea. We do it all on the internet now, but there's something to be said for that face-to-face interaction still, and I think that will go a long way to help to attract young people to get involved.
All right, next question will go to Mrs. Brosnan. Livonia recently completed a comprehensive effort to develop and approve a new land use master plan for the entire city. What parts of that plan would you like to see implemented first as mayor?
So one of the elements of the land use master plan that I really want to see implemented first is just to have it taken off the shelf. I think we worked as a community to design it, to put it together, but for the most part, if you were to ask the average resident, and I find myself doing this a lot, as we've knocked on the doors of 11,000 homes in Livonia, nobody is mentioning that there's a new land use plan, that there's a new vibrant plan for the city. So I think the first thing is to pull it off the shelf, make sure that people understand the components of it, and mostly that our businesses understand the components of it, because as we put the plan together, they are really one of the major driving forces behind how we're going to begin to redevelop this community. Without their support and assistance, the plan doesn't happen.
Mr. Tennyson?
I would have to agree with Maureen on that. It has to be put out in public for the people to understand. And I think that, like any major project, that is the first thing. We have to get buy-in from the people. But as was also mentioned earlier today, I think that the first area of focus that we need to pay attention to is this area right here on this campus.
Next question will go to Mr. Tenniswood first. And you alluded to this earlier, but I have like a series of questions here, and I think the general frustration is that people in Livonia don't feel like they get enough county and state dollars back, particularly for roads and other services. And I guess your thoughts on that and how you'd address that. Let's go to Mr. Cheswood first.
Well, thank you for that question. It allows me to talk a little bit more about what my intentions are. I want to make sure that the people of Livonia know what is actually going on with the communications with the county. County electeds are also elected by us and the people of the rest of the county. We are a huge voting bloc, and we can make a difference. So I think that what we have to do is, first of all, we have to unite as a city. We've got to come to an agreement with what our priorities are. Now, I do not expect that Livonia, I'm going to get elected as mayor and Livonia's going to get all the tax dollars for roads. That's not going to happen. That's not realistic. But I think when you look at the plan for even this year, you can see that Livonia is grossly underrepresented. And someone should be held accountable for that. So I want to make sure that the people of Livonia know what communications are coming out of the city and what communications are coming back to the city. And those people that are making those communications should be held accountable when it comes time for re-election.
Mrs. Brosnan.
Dan, so much of our ability to impact the imbalance in our funding, and the residents are right, there is an amazing imbalance. We're what I call a donor city. We contribute more in taxes than we are in fact getting back, not just for our roads, but for our parks too, and that's on a countywide basis. So what that means though is that while we might want to muscle the county into doing something, or we might want to muscle the state into doing something, a lot of how it gets done is based on relationships. It's people who know how to work with the various departments and the leaders. And I think my relationships and connections with folks in Lansing, as well as some of the folks in Wayne County, are going to go a long way to help us to get what it is that we need to get done. That combined with the expertise that we have in City Hall in terms of outlining plans long before any other communities are beginning to develop their plans, puts us light years ahead of anybody else in making sure we secure a spot in those 5- and 10-year plans that I mentioned earlier.
Okay. Next question, we'll go to Mrs. Brosnan first. Younger constituency representative here. Seeing as Livonia does not have a downtown, what would you do to create a congregation spot for Livonia's youth?
So there are a lot of ways to create congregation spots, and off the top of my head, and it's really not the top of my head because I've given it a lot of thought, we have 3. Our libraries. I think our libraries are underutilized. There is a huge opportunity to use them as points of contact for the youth in our community. So much of what the youth are doing are in the realm of gaming, and a lot of that stuff can happen in libraries. We've yet to bring a coffee shop to one of our libraries. People gather around coffee all the time. This is a simple concept that I introduced 10 years ago, and for some reason we still haven't found a way to get ourselves there. So you combine what we could do with libraries, combine that with what we can do with some of the open spaces and creating events. Events are marvelous ways to gather people and to pull folks together around commonalities, whether it's music or art or comedy or there are just a whole host of things that we can do to pull young people together. And we need a youth group in order to do that, so that'd be a new commission.
Mr. Cheswood.
One of the things that amazed me about being a parent to high schoolers was watching the interaction with my children and children from other high schools especially. When I was in high school, I associated with the kids from my high school, and we had a few football games against rivals, and that was pretty much it. My children were very good friends with kids from all of the other high schools in Livonia. And I believe that that interaction through social media has certainly opened doors to kids today for interaction. And as far as having a central gathering place, obviously this campus is an ideal place because it's convenient for all 3 high schools, especially for the kids to get together. But more importantly, I think that we have to remember that our kids have already developed their own social networks and how they get together. Although I think it's an important thing, I don't think it's the primary focus of the mayor of the city to provide a gathering place for kids.
All right, well, this will be the last formal question or forum today, and it's kind of representative of 2 or 3 audience questions. And the questions basically, and this will go to Mr. Tenniswood first. Basically, as mayor, how will you work with the city council for the benefit of the city?
Well, I think that relationship is very important, and it's been very interesting in this campaign of forming friendships of some of the people that I did not know. Some of these people are running for the first time. It's been very exciting to meet and get acquainted with them. But really, building these relationships now with the council is really nothing new for me, because throughout my career, I've had to work with government officials from every agency in the city and with our council. And council changes. Every couple of years, there's new faces on there. It's new people to meet, it's new people to work with. And I can tell you that I thoroughly enjoyed working with them, and I had no problems whatsoever developing those new relationships.
Mrs. Brockman.
Thanks, Dan. Again, this is an area where I find that I have a bit of a leg up because I've had a chance to work with all of the current members of the City Council. And councils before this current council, they're all amazingly dedicated people. And there is a dedicated field of candidates out there that are running to fill the 2 empty spots. So I have no doubt that given my history, my 17 years of experience, that I'll have ample opportunity to interact with these council colleagues and to bring them along in the decision-making process. And as mayor, that quite honestly is the key. Oftentimes there are organizations, businesses that find themselves in a tough situation. They're making a tough ask of a community, and before they go about doing that, it's important that the mayor pull council members together, board members together, administrative team members together, sometimes to work on crisis management plans. So I think when you engage council members at the front end, you'll find yourselves able to go further.
With that, thank you, audience, for supplying so many questions. It's very helpful this evening. We'll now go into the closing statements, 90 seconds each, and we'll start with Mrs. Rosman.
Thank you. I want to start by thanking the Livonia Chamber of Commerce for hosting tonight's forum. I'm reading this book called Leadership in Turbulent Times by Doris Kearns Goodwin, and she tells the story of how Abraham Lincoln and Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and Lyndon Johnson all met with some serious setbacks in their lives. And at moments of great challenge, often these hardships would get in the way, but in spite of them, they were able to summon their talents and enlarge the opportunities and lives of others. As I read the book, the most common denominator in all of their lives was that they showed up. They showed up no matter how difficult the situation. They showed up prepared. They showed up determined to serve and to make things better for others. There is much that needs to be done to make sure that Livonia remains the strong community that it is. It's in doing this that we need a leader that is prepared to show up. And how do I know that I am that leader for my city? Because I'm not new to being a champion for hard things. I've been tested in arenas other than elected office. And the successes that I've had are never just mine. They come as a result of being able to build coalitions, to energize people around doing the hard things, around doing great things. I'm running for mayor and I'm asking for your vote because I believe Livonia is an exceptional city. I see our potential, and I know that together we can make this a city our children want to come home to. I'm going to keep showing up, and I'm counting on you to show up too.
Thank you, Mrs. Brockman. I'll turn over to Mr. Tenniswood for his 90-second closing statement.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity to talk with the people of Livonia. I'm passionate about this election because I believe in my mission to return Livonia government back to the people. Early in my firefighting career, during the ballot initiative, I was working a polling place with Thomas H. Brown. I was 22 years old. He was in his 70s, a former mayor, and a state representative. We were on opposite sides of the issue. I felt a bit intimidated discussing our differing opinions as we fought the cold and the boredom of low voter turnout. About mid-morning, his team sent a coffee delivery. He graciously invited me to join him for a cup of coffee, which I politely declined. He then told me, "Listen, son, we can disagree, but we will not be disagreeable." And that was the day I started drinking coffee. Livonia has some problems that need to be fixed. We don't have to be disagreeable, but it's okay to disagree. I disagree with the way you, my fellow residents, are not being heard. I hear you. I disagree with glossing over and ignoring issues that are unpleasant. I will lead the effort toward transparency and action. I disagree with how Livonia government has represented you. I will fight for you. We can resolve the issues that have not been addressed. During my brief campaign, I have openly pushed the solution to our public safety crisis, and it has gained widespread support because it's the right thing to do. I believe in finding solutions to everyday problems, and as mayor, I will bring my energy and drive to City Hall every single day. Thank you, and good night.
Round of applause for one of the candidates. And willingness to serve our community in this role. Good luck to both of you in your campaigns. The Livonia Chamber of Commerce also appreciates the audience participation in this program. We applaud your efforts to be engaged in the community and learn more about these candidates. The rebroadcast of this forum will be available on Livonia Chamber's YouTube account in the coming days. More importantly, we encourage everyone to vote on Tuesday, August 6th. If you cannot vote on that day, contact the Livonia City Clerk's Office for information on obtaining an absentee ballot. That concludes our program this evening. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening.